Hello. During the next few minutes, I will teach you how to use the random spawners. First of all, I've set up a scene with an empty terrain, a very basic terrain, and I will show you what you should have after importing the package. You should see this folder with these three subfolders. You should not see this folder, nor this one, but depending on your project settings, you might already have these assets imported. So, this package has the spawning areas, which has a spawner, the spawning assets, which only has a collider named occupied space, which I'll talk about in a moment, and of course the scripts. Using the random spawners is quite easy. All you have to do is set up a terrain like this or whatever you want, and just going to the spawning areas and clicking a spawner, then dragging it on the terrain. Then make sure to make the spawner a child of the terrain. So basically that's all you need to have the spawner up and ready script-wise. To have a terrain and the spawner per se, its child. When you first import the spawner, let's just reset this to 0. It should look like this. You should have a spawner control, which is the script, a collider, which is this collider that you see here, and a spawn pool, which is 0. I will talk about it in a few seconds. In order to use the spawner, you have to teach it what assets to instantiate. You can have as many assets, and you can have it placed wherever you want on the terrain. It really doesn't make a difference. You can have it copy and paste to have several spawners, but I'll show you this in a few seconds. First, let's focus on only one spawner. You need to have some assets ready for using with the spawner, which actually isn't that difficult to do. You should choose some the assets that you want to be spawned. Let's say we'll choose a mushroom and a tree and another tree and maybe another mushroom. And in order to keep things organized, I'll just drag them over here. Using the assets as they are now will not work. What you'll need to do is drag them on the scene and have this collider a child of each one of them. So in order to quickly do this, I suggest you reset the position of the assets that you want to add the collider to 0, 0, 0, then focus on it, then drag the collider on it and make it a child. The thing with a collider is it can have any size at all. The actual size says you can not spawn anything within this area. So if you make it this wide, nothing will be spawned within these limits near the object. The way I usually do it is I have it to be just as wide as the actual object, and I only make it larger if, let's say, I have a house and I say I don't need to have any object spawning within this area around the house. So for this demo, I will just keep with the regular 111 or whatever that just fits the actual asset. After you set it, you just replace the actual asset and make sure it has the occupied space. Then you can delete it from this scene. So once you've set up the assets for use with the spawner, I'll guide you with the details that you need to fill in the spawner. First of all, the spawner has a number of general settings. One is should start the runtime, the other is how many to instantiate per frame, and a spawn limit. Let's see what each of these does. Should start the runtime. If it's checked, the spawner will start spawning when you press on play. If you don't, the spawner actually listens to a collider, which should be called spawn. And on enter, it will trigger the spawning effect. The number of items to instantiate per frame means how it tries to group the items per one frame. So if you have a very big spawner, let's say you have one with a skill of 5 and a Z of 2, if you have a spawner this large, of course you would add a lot of objects to be spawned, and it will only try to instantiate 15 or whatever number you put in here once per frame, because if you try to instantiate 400 objects once per frame, you might face some technical glitches, some performance glitches. Next, let's set it back to 1 and 1. Next, you should start telling it what items should it instantiate. First of all, if you have 4 items and you want all 4 of them to be instantiated on the spawner, you must say, I have 4 items. And then on each item, you should drag under object the corresponding assets that you want to be instantiated, like this. Okay. Each element has its own options. It has a max, a how many to pull, a should rotate, and should 90 rotate. The max means how many items to try to instantiate. It will not necessarily reflect the number of items that you will see in the scene, because the spawner will try to put objects, but only if there's enough empty space, because it will not put them on top of each other. It will put them based on the size of the occupied space that each object has. It also has a should rotate and a should 90 rotate. Basically, the should rotate should be always checked, because this will ensure that the scene will not look copy pasted. It will rotate each asset before instantiating it by a random amount. But if you press the 90 rotate, it will rotate it with a fixed 90 degrees value. So 90, 180, 270, and 360. If both of the checkboxes are checked, the should rotate is ignored, and it will always rotate them by 90 degrees. And we'll return to how many to pull in a while. Basically, this is all you need to have the spawner up and running. If you press play, you should see items being spawned. If you press play again, you should see them spawned in another order, and again, and again, and again. Let's explain how many to pull. The other important asset in the scene is the spawner pool. So every spawner, every item that you put in here during runtime is analyzed by this spawner pool, who analyzes how many spawning areas are and what assets every spawning area needs and how many, looking at the max value. Well, actually, it looks at the how many to pull, but then it looks at the max value. If this is 0, it will not add the same object to pull twice. So let's say you have 2 spawning areas and you want them to, and each of them has this asset. It will only be added once, but the number of objects that will be added in the pool will be the sum between the max of each area. So when you press play, you should see some statistics. It will show you the number of objects it was required by each spawner to add to the pool, which is 10 in this case, and how many it actually used. So it used 8 mushrooms out of 10. It used 6 mushrooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 8. It used 3 trees out of 7, 1, 2, 3, and no 3 out of 10. As I told you, it doesn't actually always return the asset that you told it to. After you look for a few times at these numbers, you should have a more correct idea of how many objects you should actually tell the spawner to add to the pool. So this is what this number is, how many to add to pool. So it might not prove very precise with I don't know if you have 20 spawners on the scene, but if you have, because you will have to do some complicated calculations with it, but if you have only one or two spawners, you should have a better idea how many to add to the pool. So maybe 10 is too much and I only want to have 5, and I will tell him add to pool 5. So if you have a number here, the max will not be used when adding to pool, but it will be used when trying to instantiate. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but basically this number here means how many objects to add to pool at runtime, and this number means how many to try to instantiate. You don't need to have the spawners perpendicular. You can have them at any degrees you want. Okay, I think this looks really nice. Cool. Okay. Another thing is the spawners are terrain height aware. So if you add here 3, let's say, and we make the terrain a bit higher, when you press play, it will add them on the, it will add them by looking at the height. So you will not see objects being spawned uh, beneath the terrain or things like that. As you can see, it looks really nice, and it was done really fast, I'd say. If you press pause and you drag this a little, you'll have a much nicer effect now. As you can see, it will add them by taking care, by paying attention to the terrain. Another thing that really doesn't have anything to do with the spawner, but with the assets. Sometimes there are assets like this tree that don't spawn correctly because they spawn a little bit, well, not a little bit, as you can see, a lot under the terrain. A quick fix for this is to add to the asset that you want higher in the name. So if you just add this part higher anywhere in the name, when you press play, it will put them now uh, under correct height. As you can see, it's not the case for the mushrooms. It's only sometimes with some of the assets, but it's this quick fix that you have. Okay, so thank you for watching, and I hope it will prove very useful to your project. Thank you.